wait a minute. I have to, absolutely, positively couldn't have done this without these people. This, I have to point out, Karen Blau, who is she collected about 70% of the mother-infant data from practically the first year on through to the end, even volunteering her time to come in and do it. I was the backup when she was in Germany visiting her mother, and other people contributed, but she was just really amazingly helpful. And all these people did observations of mothers and infants or took care of the monkeys, and Matt Jorgensen was the master of the database. So it just, obviously you can't watch this many hundreds of monkeys without it being a huge team effort. And if you notice, see, they're watching us have a picture taken. And these guys who have been fantastic over the years. I consider it a privilege to have been able to peek at their lives all these years. Okay, now questions.
Just looking at that linear trend from marginal down to prime mothers and male sociality, do you think that might be
that was male play.
Male play, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think that's scaling with body condition of the yearlings?
Why would the male sons of high-ranking mothers be? Oh, you mean they're more mature, so they're playing less already?
I'm not sure.
No.
I'm thinking of it from a perspective of like preparation for adult roles. So all these males are presumably going to disperse, and I know that in some species with male dispersal, that males will disperse socially in cases where maybe they need help getting into other groups. So I'm wondering if maybe this might be a way of preparing for that. Like these prime males are in excellent condition, so why bother? And then these marginal males.
Okay, they're too young for that. They're 1. And they're really not dispersing until about 5. So, and the peak of play comes at about 2. So they're definitely too young to be that far ahead of the game. One of the things that I actually have to check, I just thought of it too late and didn't have the time to put it in, is to look for size and weight differences between these groups. It may be that the marginal group were smaller, but I seriously doubt if the high-ranking group were bigger. Yeah, that's the one finding. I'm very, very surprised that the high-ranking males are playing less, and I wonder if that's a fluke because it doesn't fit any of my pre-existing notions. And I can look at different data sets earlier years and see if I get that. One thing that I did do after in thinking about the marginal, the offspring of the marginal mothers who seem to be doing so well in so many domains, but were really much lower in novelty seeking. With Mark Laudenslager, we did measure hair cortisol while they were here in Los Angeles, and right before the big move of the colony to Wake Forest. And we measured it 6 months later after the move. And it turns out that if you look at the post-move, for everybody there was a increase in the hair cortisol measuring the level of stress of the cross-country move and adapting to a whole new situation. And it looks like the offspring of marginal mothers were higher. Now I need to go back and make sure everything's clean on that. It was just a quick thing that I did last night. But I do think they may, that group that was more compromised gestationally, that they may actually be more reactive to more serious stressors. Why the high-ranking sons didn't play more. I mean, some ways they're spoiled brats, because they can get the group to threaten a new male, and but I don't know. I have to look at that more and see if that replicates in other components of the data set.
Yeah, I was just thinking it might fit with social buffering as well. Maybe these high rankings.
They don't need to. They've got it all. Yeah. In fact, though, it turns out that mothers, when we do move males out of the groups, we move them into a bachelor group for a while and then move them into groups. And when I did that systematically, looking at characteristics of the males before they left and how they, who became alpha after they moved in, during that period we were moving in 3 or 4 males into a group. Mother's rank didn't do it. Now, they didn't go with their siblings, but mother's rank didn't predict it. Male characteristics before they left were significant predictors, but so it's maybe it's because they didn't play enough when they were 1. Yes?
When the infants are trying to elicit behavior from the mothers, I presume like most of the time when, for example, when she's trying to wean them, she's not responding. But is there a difference by condition of mother in terms of whether or not she will respond to the infant's attempts, or is it independent of the condition of the mother?
That's, you know, just thinking about the quality of, I know that for the 3-year-old mothers, many of them they're not as into it as they should be. So, like I say, they will let caretakers take the infant and not try to go retrieve it. And did they respond differently when the infants were trying to get on and they were pushing them off? I don't have a sense of that. I don't have something that pops into my mind thinking that that they would respond differently in that time. These are subtle interactions. These are not, you know, they're not abusing the infant. They're just not letting them, you know, pushing them off or not letting them get on. And in the absolutely most extreme cases, might do like a threat or a bite, but not. It's not never a real bite. You know, it's just I mean it. I'm not so sure that we have in the data sets enough information to enough fine-tuned, you know, definitional information to get at that point. But I will ask Karen what her thoughts about that are.
So in a way, then the infant's behavior doesn't really positively affect its own fitness in some sense, that it's not succeeding in terms of actually being able to elicit response, or it's not, at least it's not being able to. It's not translated into some infants can do it better than others because of the mothers, but rather they all are in sort of the same position.
Well, they are regaining access because they're trying more than they would if they just, you know, did what the mother said and didn't try more. Variation within each of those groups in what these are all surviving infants, don't forget. So I mean they all survived on those graphs that I showed you, so they all did well enough. I am going to look at their weight and length when they're 1 and see if that made a difference and if it related to how much they approached or how much the mother rejected them. I think that would be an interesting point. It may be that the smallest mothers had smaller babies, but I'm not sure. That's an important thing to look at, especially regarding the developmental program.
Is there any age after which it kind of pays off, or it stops paying off to bet on the chances that you'll have another kid successfully, and just you start investing, you just give everything you have to the kid?
Yeah, I mean the terminal investment hypothesis, I think I remember testing to see if that was true years ago and during the early years of the period and not finding it. I don't know. What do you think, Susan? Do your older females let the kids stay on longer?
Yeah, they do.
The very old ones?
Sample, like
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We had one that was weaned at age 3 something.
Mm-hmm. With this replication study, I didn't look to see who was more rejecting and who wasn't. I actually just used the original criteria But I can use the replication sample to see if that's the case for the old versus the young. Our older females did not, they had lower fertility. So they would skip many years and then all of a sudden maybe have an infant. And they didn't seem to be particularly rejecting, but some of them were getting into the stage of life with impaired physical fitness on their own part. I think that, I don't know, I'll pull out the older mothers. I mean, we had one mother who had an infant when she was 26, which is way longer than the original field people thought vervets were supposed to live, and the baby lived. It was born at the wrong time of year. It was born in January, which was very strange too. So, I'll go look at her data and see if what she did.
Right, because it's possible, following up on Liz' remarks, that what you're seeing in the 3-year-old moms and what you're seeing in the elderly moms, in the 3-year-old moms, it's an adaptation to allocate energy optimally over lifespan, and then in the elderly moms, it's pathology. It's that they're simply incapable of.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the reasons the age cutoff of 14 was done from the early years where they were starting to have some medical problems at 14 and starting to have longer interbirth intervals. As the colony moved forward, actually, I would have picked an older age as the successive colony-born generations got into that age. I would have picked an older age because actually I would have picked 18 as an age where they're starting to look more crotchety than 14, but I just decided it was better to just go with the original grouping. But yeah, now I have to go back and look at the data some more and look at that whole range for the older females.
I don't know enough about the sociality of vervet monkeys to ask, but I mean, there's a lot of speculation that the world of infant attachment in humans with respect to their adult attachments is a little muddy. I'm wondering if you see anything longitudinally with respect to these kinds of relationships early on and then their sociality later.
Well, what in a chapter of a long time ago, again based on that early years of my 4 original groups, I did note that mother-infant contact time was repeated across generations. So the daughters tended to have the same degree of mother-infant contact time as their own, as they had experienced as infants. I'm not sure how much that will hold up. We have the colony pedigreed, so I look for heritable variation in traits. And it turns out that these maternal behavior traits generally very low heritability, which is unusual because most of our traits are significantly heritable, even in the like 0.3 to 0.5 range. And I think it's partially because the mothers are responding throughout their lifetime to these changing conditions, and they responded to the diet change. So in that sense, I think that it's interesting that the individual differences are relatively small compared to these life stage and nutritional context situations, meaning that they really are adjusting to local circumstances. Does it predict their sociality later in life? Well, one of the confounds with the prime group is that high-ranking females growing up into the high-ranking family they are more popular, they're more a focus of other individuals' attentions, and so they do tend to spend more time near than individuals in other groups. So that's somewhat of a confound developmentally for the prime group, not for the marginal group. So it was all the more remarkable that they showed increases in time near others there. Yeah. I have, you know, I will often try to look at maternal behavior to predict later behavior. And again, in the earlier data set, I did show that maternal protectiveness was associated with the novelty, an earlier variant of novelty seeking. And the more protective mothers had more hesitant offspring, as one would expect. And in order to, but you've got both genetic and early environmental factors kind of weighing in together there. And one way to get at that is I looked, there's an environmental factor that increases maternal protectiveness. And that's when we put new males in the group. Every 2 or 3 years, we put in fresh males when we take out the natal males, and mothers are more protective. So I looked at the offspring of in new male years versus resident male years, and that protectiveness was related, you know, that increase in protectiveness resulted in lower novelty-seeking scores. So that was for 2-year-olds. So that's another indication that there's some carry forward, particularly with that novelty-seeking task, which seems to pick up these things. Whereas what's going on in the group, for the group behaviors, we saw no effects on activity level, whereas the move of the monkeys from Los Angeles to Wake Forest resulted, with the much higher cortisols, resulted in a serious inhibition of locomotion. They were just, what's going to happen now? You know, it was, so in a more serious stressor, we do see inhibitory effects on locomotion. For none of these differences was locomotion impaired at all. But again, you know, it's really interesting because I've always been interested in these long-term effects. But there's so many different ways to look at it. And if you just cherry pick your effect and think you've demonstrated, you know, continuity, it's actually was very instructive doing it this way. And how many significant correlations out of 20 are you expecting to get by chance, too? Don't forget that. You saw everything right here. So, we don't have Dan. Just let me put in a plug. That, you know, again, just like there's expectable range of variation, that you people, anthropologists, obviously favor studying monkeys in the field, but it's not just a field versus captive. If you manage situations, if you have situations like you have on Cayo Santiago, or colonies that are really managed to try to replicate social circumstances, you can find an amazing amount of stuff in a well-managed captive colony. And even things that are harder to do in the field. It's like we found interbirth interval effects in early studies at the colony that would be hard to find in the field because we're not also dealing with annual variation in food supply and many other environmental factors. I could look at the mother increases her care for this kid and it affects her interbirth interval because I didn't have to try to weed out all the other confounding factors. So it's a well-managed captive situation can provide a lot of interesting developmental information.